Differences across countries have many roots and branches intertwined in different ways. We've introduced a lot of variables in discussing objections to GMOs. How these variables play out is affected not only by different risk preferences of individuals, but of whole societies as well. Japan and Europe, for example, are on the whole more risk-averse than the United States, so interpretation of the inevitable scientific uncertainty around biotech is more readily interpreted as risk, and risk politics is consequentially more powerful. Likewise, the United States public is more likely to believe that outcomes produced by market forces, rather than bureaucratic regulators, are acceptable compared to other countries. Yet Europe began development of genetic engineering as enthusiastically as the United States, with government backing. It was the development of social movements concerned with environmental risk that caused a reversal of European policy in 1998, with consequences for the global acceptance or rejection of GMOs. So there's no single explanation that applies universally. That is, nothing parsimonious in a real scientific sense, but we do see common patterns in empirical studies. We can cover only a few of these here by addressing questions to a hypothetical polity. First, what are your national economic needs? For example, India and China both have deep economic interest in cotton textiles and severe problems with insecticide pollution in cotton. Both began development of Bt cotton very early, and farmers in both countries have adopted it widely. Both countries had strong interests that did not apply in Europe, for example, but did apply in the United States and parts of Africa, Burkina Faso, for example. China's public sector Bt cotton was far more successful than India's, but farmers in both places widely adopted the technology and even made their own stealth seeds that circulated in rural areas and even migrated outside the country. Second question is, do you eat it? Anxiety about food safety is universal and makes for strong risk politics. Bt cottonseed oil is eaten and the cake is fed to animals, but neither India nor China moved to commercialize major food crops. Globally, there is very little consumption of GMOs directly, but a great deal in processed form, oils, sugars, or indirectly by consumption of animals fed on GMOs, even in Europe. Somehow, animal ingestion and digestion remove the taboo or stigma from GMOs. I've never understood exactly why, but that seems to be the case. Third, what advocacy networks and organizations have access and power? Farmers in Argentina and Brazil were able to overcome objections of urban campaigners to get approval of herbicide-tolerant GM soy, but farmers in much of Africa have failed to overcome objections of urban and international advocacy groups that oppose all GMOs. Sources of political weight change continually. The natural foods industry is a relatively new player, but has global presence and large financial resources. There's a premium for GMO-free products as for organic. Fourth, who do you trade with? Early enthusiasm for independent ag biotech, that's not Monsanto, in Southeast Asia was dampened by worries of exports to Europe after social movements in Europe officially turned policy against GMOs in 1998. African nations experienced the same concern about exports to Europe. It's interesting to me that patterns of colonial influence and regional power can be seen here. Countries that were once European colonies tend to be more hostile to GMOs. Nations in the Western Hemisphere and the Philippines, a former U.S. colony, tend to be more favorable. These patterns reflect not just trade, but cultural influences, advocacy networks, and media as well. Fifth question is, who makes your decisions? Regulatory structures vary greatly across nations. There's even some disagreement on how to define a GMO and what has to be regulated. What tests need to be done and by whom, for how long, with what transparency, who pays? Is civil society involved or only scientists and experts?